Hi everyone, this is Bob Kilner, and this is Teaching Modality and Redundancy Principles Using Multimedia for EdTech 513, Summer 2009. Okay, the objective of this presentation is that at the conclusion of this lesson, I want any learner to be able to describe these principles as they apply to good practice in curriculum and education. So being able to use these and apply them is the main goal of this. Okay, the modality principle says that, we want to avoid presentations where all words are printed rather than spoken. For example, if I'm doing a tutorial on titrations in chemistry, I might show the picture seen here. The narration would be something to this effect, and this would be the end result of a titration. So it would be final step. As you drip the titrant drop by drop into the beaker, you swirl the beaker. Once the color stays a pale shade of pink, you're at the end point. So this would be a step that would be near the end point of titration, the final output. Okay, I didn't include any text that I was reading off of. I didn't include anything there. The graphics are being described by just my narration alone. Another good example of the modality principle is here. This is in biology. Mitosis is an important process necessary to stay in life, and these show the steps. Now, what they're showing is, there's some graphics here with some text that's showing the different part of the graphics, but the actual learning that's occurring is the different phases. So, for instance, we're going to start up at interphase in the upper left-hand corner. This is the rest phase. Chromosomes double and chromatids are formed. We move on to prophase. We're going to skip the transition phase. In prophase, chromosomes condense from long strands into rod-like structures. After this, we move on to metaphase. We're going to skip prometaphase because it's kind of controversial. Nuclear membrane dissolves. Paired chromatids align at the center. At the cell's equator attached to spindle fibers. Okay, and as you can see, that's what's happening. We move on to anaphase. The paired chromatids separate. Each chromatid is pulled to the opposite side of the cell. Finally, in telophase, the nuclear membrane forms around each set of chromosomes and they condense, and this then splits apart into two new daughter cells. Okay, so you saw what I did was I gave you narration that included each step. Yes, I flew through it, but the point is I didn't read right off the slide. I didn't include text that was unnecessary here. Now, there are situations where on-screen text is acceptable. In this case, this is Ohm's law, V equals IR, and this is a triangle used as a selling point for the law itself and to remember the formula. So I would say give you a problem and leave this on the screen. Okay, leave this text up here. I would say something like, how much voltage is in a line with a resistance of 10 ohms and a current of 20 amps? Well, we just represented the I and the R, so we're looking for voltage. So simply we'd multiply 10 ohms times 20 amps to get 200 volts. Okay, and I could give a whole bunch of problems involving this and leave this on the screen. Okay, poor example modality. These are the 10 steps of glycolysis. Okay, glycolysis is another biological process. Now the problem here is each of these, imagine this without the graphic being too small. Okay, if I explain the steps as written while a person tried to watch the text and the animation, if this was animated, the person wouldn't be able to cognitively process all three parts. It's just impossible. We'd suffer a severe overload. Okay, that's why modality becomes so important. Okay, redundancy principle, and as you can see, this graphic here is moving on. What this is showing, okay, is it's a civil unrest in France over a 2-week period in 2005. If I was teaching a lesson surrounding this animation, I'd explain each step in the animation without putting anything on the screen except maybe the names of the sections of France that are in question here. And what the redundancy principle says is that we're going to use concurrent graphics and audio only instead of concurrent graphics, audio, and text. And it's redundant to add on-screen text to narrated graphics. As I move on, a good example of the redundancy principle, I'm going to go back to titrations. Now here, prior to a lab featuring titrations, I would walk my students through the procedure. This graphic could serve as a model of the outlined steps. There is a little on-screen text, and I would use each figure to explain them. Figure 1 would say something to the effect of, the start point is prior to any base being added. Figure 2, slowly begin to add the base drop by drop. If you end up with a large amount of pink, you need to slow down as you're adding, and you must swirl it. When the color stays a very pale pink, as in figure 3, you have reached the end point. But if you go to a dark pink color, you've gone too far and used too much of the titrant. Okay, so this is how we can use this redundancy principle to not overdo it. Now there are points when you can narrate on-screen text. If there's no pictures, you can do it. If the learner has ample time to process the pictures and/or words, if I'm going to leave slides up for an extended period of time, it's okay to do it. And if the learner is likely to have difficulty processing spoken words, whether it's through their ears and the sound or through their brain being unable to process. Okay, all of these are situations when you can narrate on-screen text. Now, the major reasons for adhering to the principles of modality and redundancy are basically this. Modality principle is in place to prevent brain overload by the learner. By presenting too much information through text, graphics, and narration, the audio-visual channels within the brain can become overloaded and the processing of the information can be distorted or not go through altogether. Now, the redundancy principle is in turn in place because what is known as the learning styles hypothesis, which directly relates to Gardner's theory of multiple intelligences. And what the learning styles hypothesis says is that the instruction needs to be flexible enough to support all types of learners. Okay, so it must appeal to all these different multiple types of learners. All right, so finally my assessment then. During what situations is it okay to narrate text that appears on the screen? And this was directly on one of the slides a few minutes ago. A, if there are no pictures or graphics present. B, if the learner has more than enough time to process the pictures and or words. C, if the learner has difficulty hearing spoken words or difficulty processing those words. Or D, all of the above. If you answer D, you're correct. Okay, like we said before, all of these are reasons that you're allowed to narrate on-screen text, and it does not break the principles that we want to follow here. And then finally, my last assessment question, is this a good example of modality and redundancy? Why or why not? Now, you have to keep in mind that I would be narrating this. And if I would narrate it explaining the costs and how they apply themselves to a given situation, would this still be an example of good principles? And the answer here is yes, because we're not overloading with graphics and text. Okay, we have the graphic up there with a little bit of labels, but I would narrate what all this means. And we wouldn't be overloaded because we could take the narration and go right to the pictures. So these are the reasons that modality and redundancy are so important, how to follow them, and the idea behind these principles.